Everything I owned disappeared in flames. 65 years of life, gone in an hour. My son, the boy I raised, the man I sacrificed everything for, turned me away at his door. Said his fiancée needed space, needed privacy, needed their sanctuary protected from his homeless mother. So I did something desperate. I called a man I hadn't spoken to in 40 years. A man I loved when we were young. A man who promised to come back for me. He never did. Until now. When he opened the door to his mansion, he said 3 words that changed my life forever. You finally came home. But let me start where it all fell apart. My name is Grace. I'm 65, and I thought I'd already survived every kind of pain this world could throw at me. I was wrong. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon in Charlotte. The kind of day that feels like every other day. Safe. Predictable. Mine. I was standing in my kitchen making coffee when I smelled it. Smoke. Not the gentle smell of something burning on the stove. This was different, sharper, wrong. I turned toward the living room. The door was closed, but smoke was already seeping underneath it like dark, fingers reaching for me. I opened it. And the world exploded. Flames were eating my curtains, crawling up the walls with a hunger that felt almost alive. The smoke was so thick I couldn't see 3 feet in front of me. My smoke detector should have been screaming, but it was silent. Dead battery. I'd been meaning to replace it for months. That one small mistake cost me everything. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The heat was already unbearable, and I was still standing in the doorway. I heard glass shatter somewhere behind the flames. That's when my body finally moved. I ran back to the kitchen, grabbed my purse off the table, my phone, nothing else. There was no time for anything else. The last thing I saw before I burst through the back door was Robert's portrait on the wall. My late husband. His face was already darkening from the heat, warping, disappearing, just like everything else. I stumbled into the backyard, coughing so hard I thought my lungs would tear apart. My neighbors were already outside staring at the smoke pouring from my windows. Mrs. Jenkins, 78 years old and barely able to walk, was the first one to reach me. She wrapped her arms around me while we both watched my life burn. The fire department arrived fast. 10 minutes, maybe less. But it didn't matter. By the time they got the hoses on it, there was nothing left to save. They kept the fire from spreading to the other houses. That's all they could do. In 1 hour, 40 years of memories became ash. The kitchen table where my son used to do his homework. The marks on the wall where I measured his height every birthday. The bedroom I shared with Robert for 37 years. All of it. Gone. I stood on the sidewalk wrapped in a blanket someone gave me, watching the firefighters work. Watching the smoke turn from black to gray to white as the flames died. The fire chief walked over to me eventually. His face was covered in soot. His eyes were full of pity I couldn't stand to see. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," he said. "We did everything we could." He didn't need to finish. I could see it for myself. Total loss. Everything I owned, except the clothes on my back and whatever was in my purse, was gone. The neighbors took me in that first night. Sweet Mrs. Jenkins insisted I stay with her. But her apartment was tiny and already full of visiting grandchildren. The Red Cross offered emergency shelter. But the thought of sleeping in a gymnasium surrounded by strangers made me feel even more lost. That's when I knew. I had to call David. My son. David lives 40 minutes away in Valentine, one of those neighborhoods where every house looks like it belongs in a magazine. Perfect lawns, perfect trees, perfect lives. He moved there 4 years ago after a promotion. Regional manager. Good salary. Big house. We weren't close. Not the way mothers and sons should be. But he was all the family I had left. I borrowed Mrs. Jenkins' phone to call him. Mine had melted in the fire along with everything else. "David, sweetheart." "It's Mom," I said, my voice cracked. "There was a fire. The house is gone. Everything's gone." Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Were you hurt? He finally asked. No, just some scrapes. My throat hurts from the smoke. But I'm okay. Another pause. I need a place to stay, I said. The words felt like swallowing glass. Just temporarily. Just while I figure things out. More silence. Then, sure, Mom. Come over. We'll work it out. The relief hit me so hard I almost collapsed. My son would take care of me, despite everything. The distance, the missed calls, the uncomfortable holiday dinners. He was still my boy. I spent the next morning at the ruins, waiting for the insurance adjuster. He showed up at 9. Young guy, looked bored. He walked around with his clipboard and camera, taking notes like he was inspecting a broken appliance. Total loss, he said. Flat, clinical. How much? I asked. You had $200,000 on the structure. With the deductible and depreciation, you're looking at maybe $90,000, maybe less. $90,000 to rebuild 42 years of life. Mrs. Jenkins helped me buy some basic clothes, Target, Walmart, whatever we could afford with the emergency money from the Red Cross. Everything I owned fit into one small borrowed suitcase. That was it. That was all I had left. The drive, too. David's house felt like traveling to another country. Everything looked different when you had nowhere to return to. The gas station where I always bought lottery tickets. The diner where Robert and I used to have Sunday breakfast. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else's life now. David's neighborhood was immaculate. Perfect sidewalks, perfect mailboxes, perfect flower beds. I felt like an intruder bringing my tragedy into their spotless world. His house was a 2-story colonial. White shutters, red door. Victoria, his fiancée, had picked it out. I'd met her exactly 3 times in the 2 years they'd been together. She was 30. He was 39. She worked in marketing and had opinions about everything. I pulled up in the cab and sat there for a moment, staring at that red door. This is temporary, I told myself, just until the insurance money comes through. Just until I find a small apartment somewhere. I never imagined that walking up to my son's front door would be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But as I reached up to knock, I felt it. That sinking feeling. The same hollow sensation I felt when Robert died. Like the floor was disappearing beneath my feet. I just didn't know yet how much further I was about to fall. David opened the door before I could knock, like he'd been watching. For one moment, seeing his face, Robert's eyes, my own stubborn chin. I thought everything might be okay. Mom, he said. But his voice was wrong, distant, uncomfortable. Victoria appeared behind him almost immediately. White jeans, silk blouse, hair pulled back in one of those messy buns that somehow look perfectly styled. Her smile never reached her eyes. Grace, how horrible about your house, she said. But she was looking at my cheap suitcase, not at me. David told me what happened. I put the suitcase down in their pristine entryway, suddenly aware of how I must look. My bargain clothes, the smell of smoke still clinging to my hair despite 2 showers. It's just temporary, I said quickly, just until I get back on my feet. David and Victoria exchanged a glance. One of those silent conversations between couples. The kind that shuts everyone else out. Let's sit down and talk, David said. He led me into the living room. Their house was beautiful, the way magazine houses are beautiful. Everything matched. Nothing was out of place. White furniture that looked like no one had ever sat on it. It was the kind of house where you're afraid to touch anything. I sat on the edge of the sofa. Victoria noticed my shoes on their perfect floor and flinched. So what's the plan? David asked. He sat in the armchair across from me, not next to me, not where he could put his arm around his devastated mother. Opposite me, like we were in a business meeting. The insurance will take a few weeks to process, I said. Maybe a month. I was hoping I could stay here until then, just until I find a small apartment. Silence. 10 seconds too long. I watched Victoria's jaw tighten. She leaned over and placed her hand on David's arm. Possessive. Controlling. "Mom," David began. I knew from his tone what was coming. "The thing is, Victoria and I have been talking. We really value our privacy here. This house is our sanctuary. You know." I blinked, not understanding. "I wouldn't be in your way," I said. "I'd keep to myself. I'll help with cooking, cleaning. You won't even know I'm here." Victoria leaned forward. Her voice was soft but firm. "It's not about being a bother, Grace. It's about space. This is our first home together. We're still finding our rhythm as a couple." "I'm his mother," I said. The words came out sharper than I meant them to. "Of course you are," Victoria replied smoothly. "And that's why we thought you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. Somewhere you can have your independence while you rebuild." I looked at David, waiting for him to contradict her. To remember that I was the woman who stayed up with him through every fever, who worked double shifts to pay for his college books, who held his hand through his divorce 3 years ago. Instead, he nodded. "Victoria's right. Mom, we think you'd be happier with your own space." The words hit me like a physical punch. I felt my chest constrict, like someone was squeezing my lungs. "Happier?" I whispered. "David, I lost everything yesterday. Everything. And you think I'd be happier, alone in a hotel room, than here with my family?" "It doesn't have to be a hotel," Victoria said quickly. "There are some lovely extended stay places near the mall. Very clean, very safe. They have little kitchenettes, so you can cook for yourself." I stared at this woman, in my son's life for only 2 years, telling me where I should live after losing my home. "And how am I supposed to pay for this lovely, extended stay place?" I asked. "The insurance money won't arrive for weeks." David shifted uncomfortably. "I could help with that. A few $100 to get you started." A few $100? Like I was a distant relative he barely knew. Not the woman who gave him life. "David," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I changed your diapers. I rocked you through colic. I taught you to ride a bike. I helped you with homework. I held you when Lucia Velasco broke your heart in high school." His face twisted slightly, but Victoria squeezed his arm harder. "No one's questioning your history," she said. "We just think everyone would be more comfortable with boundaries." "Boundaries! You're kicking me out," I said flatly. "We're not kicking you out," David protested. "We're just saying this arrangement wouldn't work for anyone." Whose idea was this? I asked, though I already knew. "We discussed it together," David said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. I stood up slowly, my knees cracking, reminding me I was 65 and alone in the world. "I understand. Mom, don't be like that. We're trying to do what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone?" I repeated. "What would be best for everyone, David, is if your mother didn't have to sleep on the street tonight." Victoria's face contorted into fake concern. "You don't have to sleep on the street. Like I said, there are options." I looked around that flawless living room one last time, at the family photos that included David and Victoria but none of me, at the expensive furniture no one was allowed to actually use, at my son, who had chosen this cold, beautiful woman over his own mother. "You're right," I finally said. "There are always options." I picked up my suitcase. It felt heavier now. "I'll call you in a few days," David said, "once you get settled somewhere." "Don't bother," I said. My voice was steady, surprisingly steady. "I wouldn't want to invade your sanctuary." Victoria looked slightly ashamed, but not enough to speak up, not enough to say, "Wait, this is wrong." I walked out. Through the front window, I could see them talking, probably about how difficult I was being, how much drama I was bringing into their peaceful lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years after Robert died, telling myself I was strong, independent, that I didn't need anyone. Now, when I truly needed help, I discovered that independence is a luxury you can only afford when you have options. I walked to a budget hotel 3 blocks away. The rest stop in, peeling paint, flickering neon sign. The kind of place where you don't ask questions about your neighbors. I spent almost all the money I had left on one night. $38. The room smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners. The mattress was so thin I could feel the springs through it. Sat on the edge of that bed and tried to figure out where a 65-year-old woman with no money and 1 suitcase of cheap clothes was supposed to go. That's when I saw it. My purse was on the bed next to me. I'd been carrying it when I ran from the fire. Everything else burned, but my purse survived. I opened it. Wallet, some change, lipstick, tissues. And then I saw the business card, yellowed with age, soft from being handled so many times over so many years. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. Randall Galloway. The name was written in faded blue ink. Beneath it, a phone number, on the back, in my own handwriting from 40 years ago. Never forget. G.I. had written those words when I was 25, believing with absolute certainty that Randall Galloway would be the great love of my life. He was 26, dark hair that fell over his forehead, eyes the color of warm amber. He worked for his father's construction company and dreamed of building something bigger, something that mattered. We dated for 9 months. At 25, that felt like forever. He used to take me to the overlook on the hills outside the city. We'd sit on the hood of his car and talk about our plans. "I'm going to start my own business," he'd tell me. "Something with construction, real estate development, something that makes me rich enough to give you everything you deserve." "I'll come back for you, Grace," he promised the night before he left for Atlanta. "I'm going to make something of myself. Then I'll come back and marry you." But promises at 25 have a way of fading when real life takes over. He wrote letters at first, long, passionate letters full of dreams and plans. I wrote back, told him about my job at the bank, about how I was waiting, just like I promised. Then the letters grew shorter, less frequent. When I met Robert 6 months later at a church event, Randall felt like a beautiful dream I'd once had. Too good to be real. Robert was steady, reliable, already 32 with a good job at the phone company. He didn't promise me the world, but he promised me a house, a family, security. When he proposed after 5 months, I said yes. I put Randall's business card in the pocket of my wedding dress, a secret talisman I couldn't bring myself to throw away. I transferred it to every wallet I owned for 40 years. Now, sitting in that terrible hotel room, I wondered what had become of that young man with the amber eyes. I'd followed him sporadically over the years, the way you do with first loves. Through mutual friends, I heard he'd made good on his promises, started a construction firm, became successful. He never married, which surprised people. Too busy building his empire, they'd say. Galloway was always ambitious. The last I heard, maybe 8 years ago, his company had expanded beyond North Carolina, Atlanta, Miami, big projects, shopping centers, office buildings. Galloway Development. The young man from the construction company had become the kind of man who wore expensive suits and made decisions that affected hundreds of people. What would that man want with a 65-year-old widow staying in a budget hotel with nothing but a Target suitcase? The rational part of my brain said it was ridiculous, pathetic even. You don't call someone after 40 years because your life fell apart. You don't look up your young love when you're old and desperate and have nowhere to go. But rational thought is a luxury when you're counting quarters and trying to figure out if you have enough for one more night. I spent 3 nights in that hotel before I found the courage to make the call. 3 nights waking up with a sore back from the thin mattress. 3 nights listening to arguments through paper-thin walls. 3 nights washing my few clothes in the bathroom sink and hanging them on the single chair to dry. The business card felt like tissue paper between my fingers, worn smooth from 4 decades of being carried but never used. On the 4th morning, I couldn't take it anymore. My back ached. The money was running out. The hotel had already warned me they needed the room for a booking the next day. I sat at the scratched table, staring at that card, my hands trembling from more than just the morning chill. What would I say? "Hello, Randall. Remember me? I'm homeless now. Can you help?" The number on the card was probably disconnected, or it would ring through to some secretary who would politely inform me that Mr. Galloway was far too important to take calls from random women, claiming to have known him decades ago. But what if it wasn't disconnected? What if he answered? My heart hammered as I dialed. Each digit felt like a step off a cliff. It rang once, twice. Galloway Development. "Randall speaking." His voice was deeper now, shaped by time and responsibility, but unmistakably his. After 40 years, I would have recognized it anywhere. I almost hung up, almost hit the end button, and went to find some other solution. But something in his tone, some warmth that seemed to cut through the phone and wrap around me, made me speak. "Randall, it's Grace. Grace Thorne. Well, I'm Grace Roberts now. But I used to be Thorne." Silence. Long enough that I thought maybe the call had dropped. Maybe he'd hung up. Maybe he had no idea who I was. Then, Grace. Just my name. Said like a prayer. Like a wonder. "I'm so sorry to call like this." I rushed. I know it's been a long time and I probably shouldn't be calling, but I just didn't know who else to turn to. "Where are you?" He interrupted, his voice sharp with concern. "I'm in Charlotte, at a hotel called the Rest Stop. I know this sounds crazy, but my house burned down last week. I lost everything. My son doesn't want me to stay with him, and I have nowhere to go." The words spilled out in a torrent, each one harder to say than the last. Admitting that your own son rejected you felt like admitting you'd failed at the most fundamental part of being human. "Give me the exact address," Randall said, his voice now entirely professional, focused. "I'm coming to get you." "You don't have to do that. I don't know why I called. I guess I needed to hear a friendly voice. Grace." His tone allowed no discussion. "Tell me where you are. I'm walking to my car right now." Over the phone, I could hear a door closing, an engine starting. He was really coming. This man I hadn't spoken to in 40 years was dropping everything to rescue me from a budget hotel. I gave him the address, my voice barely a whisper. "Randall, I'm not the girl you remember." "Neither am I," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "But I've been waiting 40 years for this call." After we hung up, I spent the next hour in a state of panic and disbelief. What was I doing? What were we doing? This was insane. You can't just pick up a relationship after 4 decades, like you're continuing a conversation from yesterday. But as I looked out the window, waiting for a car I wouldn't recognize, carrying a man who might not recognize me, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the fire. Hope. Maybe it was foolish hope. Maybe it would lead to more disappointment, more heartbreak. But at 65, with nothing left to lose, hope was worth the risk. At exactly 10:45, a silver Mercedes pulled up in front of the hotel. Gleaming, polished, completely out of place against the worn backdrop of the street. I peered through the window as it parked. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see inside. But something deep in my chest told me it was him. The engine shut off. The driver's door opened. Even after 40 years, even with gray hair and lines around his eyes, even carrying the weight of decades I hadn't shared with him, I recognized him. Immediately, Randall Galloway stepped out of that car like he was stepping out of my dreams. He looked up at the window where I stood. The years crumbled away between us. grabbed my suitcase and hurried down the stairs, moving like someone who fears a dream will vanish if she waits too long. He was standing by the car, waiting. Randall had the same relaxed confidence he'd had at 26, but now it was refined, polished by success and maturity. He wore dark jeans and a navy sweater that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a month, but his eyes, those amber eyes that had haunted my dreams for decades, were exactly the same. I wanted to hide, go back to the room, pretend this wasn't happening. I looked terrible. My hair hadn't been cut in months. My cheap clothes were wrinkled. I felt small and insignificant compared to this elegant man. But he was already smiling at me. A smile that made my heart jump like I was 25 again. I walked toward him slowly, suddenly unable to breathe. "Hello, Grace," he said softly. Up close, I could see the changes time had made. His dark hair was now salt and pepper, cut short and professional. Lines bracketed his eyes and mouth. He was broader in the shoulders, more solid. But when he smiled at me, I saw the young man who used to take me to the Overlook and tell me about his dreams. "Hello," I managed to whisper. He studied my face for a long moment, those amber eyes taking in every detail. I wanted to apologize for how I looked, for how far I'd fallen, for calling him after all these years with nothing to offer but trouble. Instead, he said 3 words. "You look beautiful." I started to cry, right there on the sidewalk, in front of that budget hotel, with Randall Galloway standing next to me. I completely fell apart. 40 years of held-back tears, 4 days of uncertainty and despair, a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough. It all came out in ugly, gasping sobs I couldn't control. He didn't say anything else, didn't try to shush me or tell me everything would be fine. He simply took my suitcase with one hand and wrapped his other arm around me as I collapsed against his chest. He smelled of expensive cologne and clean laundry, of success and stability, of everything I'd lost and everything I'd never had. His sweater was soft against my cheek. His arms were strong around my trembling shoulders. "I'm sorry," I choked against his chest. "I'm sorry, Randall. I shouldn't have called. I shouldn't drag you into this mess." "Shh," he murmured, his hand stroking my back. "You should have called years ago." When the tears finally stopped, I pulled away, embarrassed by the damp patch I'd left on his expensive sweater. I must look like a disaster. He reached out and wiped a tear from my cheek, his touch gentle as a whisper. "You look like someone who's been through hell and survived," he said. "That's not a disaster, Grace. That's strength," I laughed. But it came out shaky and bitter. Strength. I'm 65. I'm staying in a dive hotel because my own son doesn't want me. That's not strength. That's pathetic, his jaw tightened. For a moment, I saw a flash of anger he was trying to hide. "Your son is a fool. You don't know him." "I don't need to know him. I know you." He paused, his hands still resting lightly on my shoulders. "Or at least I knew you. And the Grace Thorne I knew would never turn away someone in need, especially family." The way he said my maiden name, as if it were something precious he'd kept all these years, made my chest ache with longing for the woman I used to be. "That was a long time ago," I said. "I'm not that girl anymore. Maybe not," he agreed. "But I'd like to meet the woman she became." He put my suitcase in the trunk of his Mercedes like it was treasure. Not a cheap bag, containing everything I had left in the world. He opened the passenger door for me. I stood there for a moment, stunned by the unreality of it all. The morning of the fire, I had a house, memories, a life built over decades. Now I was getting into the car of a man I hadn't seen in 40 years, with no idea what came next. "Where are we going?" I asked as he started the engine. "Home," he said simply. The drive took almost an hour. We passed through increasingly wealthy neighborhoods until we reached an area I'd never seen before. Rolling hills dotted with properties hidden behind stone walls and iron gates, trees that looked professionally placed, mailboxes that probably cost more than most people's cars. Randall turned into a long driveway marked only by a small brass plaque, Galloway. The drive curved through mature trees and manicured gardens before opening into a circular entrance. In front of us was a house that took my breath away. It wasn't flashy or ostentatious. It was elegant the way real wealth is elegant, subtle, confident, built to last. Stone and wood with tall windows that caught the afternoon light. A porch that invited you to sit and stay. "Randall," I whispered, This is incredible." He parked but didn't get out right away. Instead, he sat there, looking at the house like he was seeing it through my eyes. "It's too big," he said quietly. "It always has been. I built it thinking I'd fill it one day," he shrugged. A gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. Some dreams don't work out the way you plan. "You never married." The question slipped out before I could stop it. He turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. I came close a couple times, but something was always missing. He paused, then said simply, "You." The word hung between us in the silent car, charged with 40 years of what-ifs and could-have-beens. I wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to understand how I could be missing from a life I was never part of. But before I could find the words, he was already out of the car, coming around to open my door. The house was even more stunning inside. Hardwood floors that gleamed like honey. High ceilings, furniture that looked like it belonged in magazines but didn't feel cold or museum-like. There were books everywhere, comfortable reading chairs near windows, photos scattered on tables. It felt like a home where someone actually lived, not just a showcase for success. "Are you hungry?" Randall asked, leading me into a kitchen larger than my old living room. I was about to make lunch when you called. I realized I was starving. The hotel breakfast had been stale toast and weak coffee. "I don't want to be any trouble," I began. But he cut me off with a look. "Grace, stop. You are not trouble. You are." He paused, searching for words. "You are the answer to a question I've been asking for 40 years. While he cooked, and he actually knew how to cook, moving around that huge kitchen with practiced ease, I studied the photographs scattered throughout the room. Randall at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, shaking hands with important people, with various women at charity galas and business dinners, always smiling, but never looking completely happy. "Tell me about your life," he said, placing a plate of perfectly grilled chicken and roasted vegetables in front of me. "Tell me about Robert, about your son, about everything I missed." So I did. Over a lunch that tasted like heaven after days of terrible hotel food. I told him about my marriage to Robert, steady and comfortable, giving me security and companionship, if not passion. About David, the baby I wanted so desperately and loved so fiercely, who grew up to be a stranger who valued his fiancé's comfort over his mother's needs. I told him about the years of being a good wife, a good mother, a good widow. About the fire that took everything I owned, and the son who took everything I had left. Randall listened without interruption, his amber eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I'm sorry about Robert, about your house, about your son." He paused. "But I'm not sorry you called me." "Why?" The question came out smaller than I intended. He reached across the table and took my hand in his, still strong, still gentle, still able to make my heart race after all these years. "Because I never stopped loving you," he said quietly. "Because every deal I made, every success I achieved, every dollar I earned, it was all so I could be worthy of you when you finally came back to me." Randall. I know this sounds crazy. he continued. "I know 40 years is a long time, and we're different people now. But when I heard your voice on that phone today, it was like the missing piece of my life finally clicked into place." I looked at our joined hands, his tanned and well-kept, mine worn by work and showing every day of my 65 years. "I'm not the girl you remember." "You're better," he said. "You're real. You've lived and loved and lost and survived. That 25-year-old girl was beautiful, but she was only potential. You are the woman that potential grew up to be." The words settled around my heart like a warm blanket, healing wounds. I didn't even know I was still carrying. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt seen. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's wife, not as someone's burden, but as myself. "What happens now?" I asked. Randall smiled, that same devastating smile that made me fall for him when the world was young. "Now, we figure out what the rest of our lives look like together, if you'll have me." Living with Randall was like discovering a version of myself I'd forgotten existed. The first week was strange. We tiptoed around each other like polite strangers sharing space. He gave me the entire guest suite, a room larger than my old living room, a private bathroom with a tub that could fit 2 people, a small sitting area overlooking his gardens. I felt like I was staying in a luxury hotel, afraid to touch anything or leave too much evidence of my presence. But Randall was patient, and gradually I started to relax. He had a housekeeper, Maria, who came 3 days a week, but on the other days, I found myself cooking for him. It started small, making coffee in the morning, preparing simple lunches, but Randall appreciated everything with the enthusiasm of someone who'd eaten business lunches and restaurant meals for decades. "This is incredible," he said one evening, savoring the chicken and dumplings I'd made using my grandmother's recipe. "I haven't had a home-cooked meal like this in years." "It's nothing fancy," I protested. But inside, I glowed. When was the last time anyone had truly appreciated my cooking? David used to complain that I made the same 5 dishes over and over. Victoria once suggested I try more contemporary flavors for family dinners. Randall shook his head. "It's perfect. You're perfect." That word, perfect, should have made me uneasy. I was 65 with gray roots showing, expression lines that had become permanent grooves. My hands were spotted with age, my body soft in places that used to be firm. I was anything but perfect. But when Randall looked at me, I saw myself reflected in his eyes as someone beautiful, someone worthy of love and attention, and gentle care. We fell into routines that felt as natural as breathing. Breakfast together on the back porch, Randall reading business reports while I watched the birds at his elaborate feeders. Afternoon walks around the property. He showed me the gardens he'd planted himself, the greenhouse where he grew orchids as a hobby. The evenings were for talking. We had 40 years to catch up on, and we did it slowly, carefully, like archaeologists examining precious artifacts. I told him how hard it had been to lose Robert, about the emptiness of the house in the months afterward, how I had to force myself out of bed every morning, about the loneliness of widowhood, the way people treat you like half a person once your husband is gone. He told me about his business, how it had grown from a small construction company to a development empire with projects in 3 states, about the women he dated over the years, smart, accomplished women who looked perfect next to him at charity galas, but who never made him feel whole. "There was one woman," he said one night as we sat near his fireplace, rain drumming against the windows. "Elena. She was an architect, brilliant, beautiful. Everyone said we were perfect for each other." I felt a pang of jealousy that surprised me with its intensity. "What happened?" "I proposed," he said quietly. "Christmas Eve 5 years ago. Big show. Restaurant overlooking the city. Expensive ring. Everything she said she wanted. He paused. She said yes. We planned the wedding for the following summer. But as the date got closer, I kept having this feeling that something was wrong. Not with her. She was everything anyone could want in a wife. But with me... He stared into the fire. The night before the wedding, I called it off. Randall, no. What did you tell her? The truth. He looked at me, his eyes serious. That I was still in love with a woman I'd met 40 years ago. And it wouldn't be fair to marry her while my heart belonged to someone else. The words hit me like a physical blow. You canceled your wedding. For me, for the memory of you, he said. For the possibility that someday, somehow, you might need me, and I would be here waiting. I looked at this successful, handsome man who could have had anyone, and I tried to process what he was telling me. This is crazy, I said. It is, he agreed. It's crazier that you kept my business card in your wallet for 40 years. He was right. We were both crazy, both living with ghosts of what might have been. But somehow, against all odds, our particular brand of crazy had brought us back together. 3 weeks after my arrival, David called. I was in Randall's kitchen making dinner, actually humming to myself, something I hadn't done in years. When my phone rang, David's name on the screen made my stomach clench with familiar anxiety. Hello, dear, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Mom. His tone was odd, carefully controlled. I've been trying to call you. Your phone keeps going straight to voicemail. That was true. I'd been screening calls, not ready to deal with whatever guilt or obligation David might try to impose. I've been busy. Busy doing what? I heard you checked out of the hotel weeks ago. Where are you living? I looked around Randall's beautiful kitchen, at the fresh flowers he'd brought home that morning, at the expensive wine glasses on the counter. I'm staying with a friend. What friend? Mom, you don't have friends with money. His assumption offended me, partly because it had been true for so long. After Robert died, I'd let most friendships fade. Too tired and too proud to maintain relationships when I had nothing to offer in return. Would you be surprised? I said coldly, pause. I could practically hear him processing. Mom, I think we need to talk. Victoria and I have been discussing the situation. We think maybe we were too hasty. Maybe you could stay in our guest room for a while, just until you get back on your feet. The offer that would have meant everything to me a month ago now felt hollow. Insulting, even. What made you change your mind? Another pause. We realized that maybe we were too focused on our own needs. Family needs to stick together. What he meant, I realized, was that he'd probably heard through the neighborhood. Gossip network that his mother was no longer staying in a cheap hotel. Someone had mentioned seeing her with a well-dressed man in a nice car. David was curious, and curiosity had made him generous. That's very kind of you, I said, but I'm perfectly happy where I am. Mom, you can't just move in with a stranger. It's not safe. What do you even know about this person? I know he's never made me feel like a burden. I said quietly. I know he values my company and appreciates my cooking. And he tells me I am beautiful every single day. Silence on the other end? Who is this person? Someone I should have chosen 40 years ago. I hung up before he could respond. Randall was standing in the doorway. I didn't know how long he'd been there. That was David? He asked. I nodded. He wants me to come stay with him now. Now that he thinks I might have found something better, Randall crossed the kitchen and took both my hands in his. Have you? Found something better? I looked up at this man who had waited for me for 4 decades, who had called off his own wedding because his heart still belonged to a girl he'd loved when he was young. Yes, I whispered. I have, he smiled. Then he did something that made my heart stop. He got down on one knee, right there in his kitchen, in his jeans and his old sweater. Grace, he said, I asked you this question 40 years ago, and life got in the way of your answer. So I'm asking again. He pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. "Marry me. Not because you have nowhere else to go. Not because I have a big house and money. But because we've wasted 40 years apart and I don't want to waste one more day." The ring inside was simple. A single diamond on a gold band. Elegant. Timeless. "I bought this for you when I was 28, he said. 2 years after you married Robert. I was going to throw it away 100 times, but I couldn't. It was always yours." Tears streamed down my face. "Randall." "You don't have to answer right now," he said. "Take your time. Think about it. I'll wait. I've gotten pretty good at waiting." I pulled him to his feet and cupped his face in my hands. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'll marry you. I should have said yes 40 years ago. I'm saying it now." He slipped the ring on my finger. It fit perfectly. The wedding wasn't like my first one. When I married Robert 40 years ago, it was all about what everyone else expected. White dress, church ceremony, reception at the community center with a DJ and a cash bar. We invited everyone we knew, and several people we didn't particularly like. Because that's what you did. We performed the ritual for the community, not for ourselves. This time, Randall and I did exactly what we wanted. The ceremony took place in his backyard on a crisp November morning, 5 months after that phone call in the hotel. The pastor was an old friend of Randall's. The only witnesses were Maria, the housekeeper, and Marcus, Randall's business partner and best friend of 25 years. I wore a simple blue dress that Randall said matched my eyes. He wore a gray suit that made him look distinguished and handsome. No fuss, no fanfare, no stress about impressing anyone. Just two people who had found each other again after 4 decades, promising to spend whatever time they had left together. David came to the wedding. I had debated whether to even invite him, but Randall convinced me to try one more time. "He's your son," he said simply. "You'll regret it if you don't give him a chance to make this right." So I called him 2 weeks before the ceremony. "Randall and I are getting married," I said flatly. "November 15th at 2 o'clock. You're welcome to come, but Victoria is not invited." He showed up alone, looking uncomfortable in a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He shook Randall's hand politely, made polite small talk, even managed a strained smile when the pastor declared us husband and wife. But I could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he took inventory of Randall's house, his car, the obvious markers of wealth. After the ceremony, there was a small dinner, just the 5 of us around Randall's dining room table. David sat across from me, pushing food around his plate. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, I owe you an apology. Everyone went quiet. I shouldn't have turned you away. When you needed me most, I chose wrong." His voice cracked slightly. "Victoria and I aren't together anymore. She left me 3 weeks ago, for her boss. I should have felt vindicated, satisfied that the woman who'd convinced my son to abandon me had abandoned him in turn. But all I felt was sad. Sad that it took losing someone for him to understand what he'd done. "I'm sorry." "David," I said, "and I meant it. Are you happy?" he asked, looking at me, really looking at me for the first time in years. I glanced at Randall. His hand was resting on mine on the table, his thumb gently stroking my knuckles. "Yes," I said, "I am." "Then I'm happy for you." David's eyes were wet, even if I don't deserve to be. "You're my son," I said softly. "You'll always be my son. But you need to understand something. I don't need you to take care of me anymore. I'm not a burden you have to carry," he nodded, unable to speak. "But if you want to be part of my life, really part of it, the door is open, on my terms this time." "I'd like that," he whispered. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. It wasn't a tearful reunion where everything was instantly forgiven and forgotten. But it was honest. And honesty was something we'd both been lacking. After dinner, After the others had left, Randall and I stood on the back porch, looking out at the gardens lit by small lanterns he'd placed along the paths. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. "About me?" He turned to face me, took both my hands in his. "Grace, I have spent 40 years building a fortune. I have houses and cars and investments and more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. And none of it, not one single piece of it, ever made me as happy as seeing you in my kitchen making coffee in the morning." He pulled me close. "You are not a consolation prize. You are not a rescue project. You are the reason I built all of this. Even when I didn't know you'd ever come back, I was building it for you." "I'm 66 years old." I whispered against his chest. "So am I. I have gray hair and wrinkles and my knees crack when I stand up. Good. So do mine. We'll crack together." I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from deep in your belly and shakes your whole body. "I love you," I said. "I loved you when we were young. I loved you when I was married to someone else. I loved you when I thought I'd never see you again. And I love you now." "Then we didn't waste 40 years, he said. "We just took the long way home." Image 6, Epilogue, Grace's New Life. Moi into 33. This morning, I woke up in Randall's arms, in my husband's arms, in the room that became ours, in the house that became our home. Sunlight streamed through the windows overlooking the gardens we tend together. I could smell the coffee Randall makes every morning before I wake. At 66, I am happier than I've ever been. Not because of Randall's money, not because of his beautiful house, not because of his success, but because someone sees me, truly sees me, and chooses to love what he sees. The fire took my old life, consumed it, turned it to ash. But sometimes I think as I watch Randall read his morning paper across the breakfast table, destruction is just another word for renewal. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find, everything you truly needed. The insurance money came through eventually. $92,000. Randall wanted to add to it, help me rebuild my old house. But I said no. That house was my past. I told him, "You're my future." Instead, I donated the money to a shelter for homeless women. Women like I almost became. Women with nowhere to go and no one to call. The shelter named a wing after me, the Grace Galloway Wing. Every time I hear that name, I'm reminded of how close I came to losing everything, and how miraculously I found it all. David comes to visit every other Sunday now. It's still awkward sometimes. We're still learning how to be mother and son again, without the weight of obligation and resentment. But we're trying. He's dating someone new, a kindergarten teacher named Amy, who laughs easily and doesn't care about designer furniture or perfect houses. She reminds me of who I used to be. Last Sunday, David pulled me aside after dinner. "Mom, I need to tell you something." My heart clenched. "Old habits die hard. I'm proud of you," he said. "I know I should have said it years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of how strong you are, how you survived losing everything and came out better on the other side." He hugged me then, really hugged me, the way he used to when he was small and the world felt big and scary. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, baby." The business card I kept for 40 years is framed now, sitting on Randall's desk in his home office. Randall Galloway, never forget. GA reminder that some promises are worth keeping, even when it takes 4 decades to deliver on them. Mrs. Jenkins came to visit last month. Seeing her was like seeing a ghost from my old life. She cried when she saw Randall's house, when she saw how happy I was. "You deserve this, Grace," she said, squeezing my hands with her frail, spotted fingers. "After everything you've been through, you deserve every bit of this." "I don't know if I deserve it," I told her honestly. "But I'm grateful for it," she smiled. That knowing smile old women have when they've seen enough of life to understand its patterns. Deserve and grateful. That's a good place to be. Sometimes late at night when Randall is asleep beside me, I lie awake thinking about the fire, about how terrifying it was, how much I lost, how broken I felt standing on that sidewalk, watching my life burn. And I think about the choice that came after, to call my son, who rejected me, to call Randall, who'd been waiting. One phone call changed everything. One moment of desperate courage opened a door I thought had closed 40 years ago. I think about all the women out there right now, women my age or older, women whose children have forgotten them, women whose partners have died, women who feel invisible in a world that only values youth. I want them to know, you are not invisible, you are not finished, your story is not over. Sometimes the best chapter comes after you think the book is closed. Sometimes the fire that destroys your old life is just making room for the life you were always meant to have. Randall and I took a trip to the Overlook last week. The same Overlook where he used to take me when we were young, where we'd sit on the hood of his car and talk about our dreams. The view hadn't changed. The city stretched out below us, lights twinkling in the growing darkness. But we had changed. We were older, gray-haired, carrying the weight of years and choices and losses. But we were together. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked him. "The years we lost?" He thought about it for a long moment. "I regret that you went through pain I couldn't stop," he said. "I regret that you felt alone when you shouldn't have been." "But regret the time apart?" He shook his head. "No, because that time made us who we are. And who we are, we're pretty good together." He was right. We were good together. Not perfect. Perfect is for people who don't have history or scars or complicated relationships with their adult children. We were real, and real was so much better. This morning, Randall brought me coffee in bed, like he does every morning. "What are your plans today?" he asked, settling beside me. "I thought I'd work in the garden. Maybe make that pot roast you love for dinner. Call David and see how his week went." Simple plans. Ordinary plans. The kind of plans that make up a life. "Sounds perfect," he said. And it was. At 66, I've learned something important. Home isn't a building that can burn down. It isn't a place on a map or a collection of possessions. Home is wherever someone sees all of you. The good, the bad, the broken, the beautiful, and says, "Stay." Randall said that to me the first day I arrived. When he opened the door and saw me standing there with my cheap suitcase and my tear-stained face and my shattered life. He looked at me and said 3 words. "You finally came home." And he was right. I had. After 40 years of being lost, I finally found my way home. Not to a place, to a person, to the man who never stopped waiting, to the love I thought I'd lost forever. Sometimes the story doesn't end when you think it does. Sometimes it's just beginning. My name is Grace Galloway. I'm 66 years old, and my life, my real life, started the day everything burned down. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had to start over. Tell me if you've ever found your way home. And if you enjoyed this story, there are so many more waiting for you on this channel. Real stories, real people, real second chances. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story. Until next time, remember that it's never too late for a new beginning. With love and respect,